Well, our next guest says there could be real pitfalls with taking military action in Syria, and the unintended consequences could include al-Qaeda taking over Syria if the Assad regime is weakened there. Lisa Daftari is a Mideast journalist and a Fox News contributor. What makes you think so?
I mean, President Obama has painted out a picture which is somewhat accurate, that the Syrian regime used chemical weapons and it changed the entire calculus of the situation. And while the use of chemical weapons crossed many lines, the consequences on the ground have not changed. And these are the same reasons why we didn't get involved 2 years ago and since. We have al-Qaeda as a majority of the rebels embedded with them on the ground.
Let me stop you there, because there's a piece in today's Wall Street Journal that people might be interested in reading by somebody who's been on the ground there, Elizabeth Obegi, who says that the conventional wisdom that jihadists are running the rebellion is not what she witnessed on the ground.
Well, it's difficult to say what you can witness on the ground because, again, there's a micro aspect of this entire conflict and there's a macro aspect to it as well. And looking at the use of chemical weapons is a small detail in a larger landscape of what's going on in Syria. And again, our fears from the beginning that the weapons would get into the hands of these rebels, that the chemical weapons as well would get into the hands, that they could be transferred, that there could be a passing along scenario of the chemical weapons, that you could have the Assad regime weakened by these attacks, as limited as they may be, and then you have al-Qaeda sweeping in and taking over. And the U.S. has to ask itself, are the consequences worth it? Would we rather have an al-Qaeda regime an Assad regime?
There are other aspects to this, Lisa, and one of them was expressed by Charlie Rangel, a Democrat, longtime member of the House of Representatives. He said, where's the threat to America if lives are at stake, American lives are at stake, or if it's, retaliation for Americans who've been killed, which is what past presidents have done. That's a clear national security interest. But I mean, why?
Right. But how
would
is
America
that?
Get
how
involved?
Is that now? Right, and if we use the humanitarian justification for this, then why didn't we get involved a long time ago? Why weren't those inspectors on the ground when we suspected the use? Why wasn't that the case, right? And 100,000 lives lost, was that not enough? Did we have to wait for 1,000+ lives to be lost by the chemical weapons? But here's the bottom line of the entire equation here that the Obama administration and Congress have to really consider is that there should be punishment for chemical weapons, absolutely. But should we, the U.S. and our interests in the region and abroad, also be punished for the fallout that can happen as a result of these military strikes? Yes. And that's really what we have to weigh out here.
The other thing we're learning is that horrible atrocities have been committed not just by the Assad regime, but by the opposition forces in Syria. They have committed atrocities against Syrian Christians and Alawites, and yet the United States has uttered not yet a word about that.
Right, absolutely. Again, you have to really tweeze out what's going on the ground here, and you can't just look at the chemical weapons as the only transgression in this entire conflict of over 2 years. So many lives have been lost, and if you really want to look at it in terms of looking at the chemical weapons as the only transgression, or looking at the Assad regime as having to now be punished, or looking at this as a symbolic gesture towards the Iranian regime, again, the fallout is going to be much worse. And what we have to, the failure in foreign policy towards the Middle East, not just for the Obama administration, but even before that, I have to say, Republican and Democrats alike, we have failed to really look down the line and see what the consequences may be the next day. That's in Libya and Iraq, Afghanistan, and we don't want to add Syria to that list.
All right. Lisa Daftari, good to see you. Thank you.
My pleasure.